The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps (IRGC) has officially confirmed a successful precision strike resulting in the destruction of a US E-3 Sentry AWACS, often referred to as America's Sky Eye, at Prince Sultan Air Base on March 29, 2026. According to veteran military analysts, this represents a nerve center strike, a surgical blow to the central nervous system of US Air Force operations in the Middle East. As images of the charred tail section and mangled radar rotodome circulate globally, Iranian state media has dryly mocked the incident, suggesting it is merely minor damage, mirroring the cautious language often used by the Wall Street Journal when reporting on coalition setbacks. This event marks a psychological turning point, proving that even the most protected high-value assets are within the reach of Tehran's long-range fires. Simultaneously, US Central Command (CENTCOM) has announced the arrival of the USS Tripoli in the Middle Eastern theater, carrying a formidable force of 3,500 sailors and US Marines. To truly grasp why Tehran would expend a massive saturation of missiles and drones just to hunt down a single E-3 Sentry, we must look at the aircraft's unparalleled role on the modern battlefield. The E-3 is not a fighter jet. It is an airborne warning and control system, AWACS, the literal brain of the sky. Imagine a football match where one team is suddenly blindfolded. That is the catastrophic reality of a modern air force operating without an AWACS. With its iconic rotating radar dish, the E-3 can scan every flying object within a 375-kilometer radius. It does not merely detect enemy aircraft from immense distances, it serves as a mobile battle management hub. Every critical operation, from coordinating interceptors and vectoring aerial tankers to designating targets for Tomahawk cruise missiles, flows through this airborne processor. By targeting the E-3, Iran has demonstrated a sophisticated realization. To defeat US air power, one does not need to shoot down hundreds of F-15 or F-35s. By eliminating a few E-3s, the entire US data link network is shattered. Modern stealth fighters are essentially transformed into blind boxers, forced to rely on their limited internal radars and losing the God's eye view provided by remote support. A critical detail emphasized by Western defense journals is the alarming scarcity of this specific airframe. Despite the United States being the world's preeminent superpower, the reality is that their fleet is aging and dangerously small, with only 16 E-3 Sentry aircraft currently in active service. Even more concerning is the data from the 2024 fiscal year, which revealed that the mission-capable rate for the AWACS fleet has plummeted to approximately 55%. This means that at any given moment, the entire US military only has about 8 or 9 aircraft flight-ready for global operations. The fact that Washington had deployed 6 of these units to Prince Sultan Air Base, representing nearly 40% of its total global AWACS strength, underscores the existential importance of the Iranian front. Losing a single E-3G, the most modern block upgrade, is not comparable to losing a tank or a Reaper drone. With a replacement value exceeding $500 million and a production line that was shuttered years ago on the legacy Boeing 707 airframe, replacing this loss is a near impossibility in the short term. This is an asymmetrical victory for Iran. The loss cannot be measured in dollars, but in a significant degradation of strategic aerial surveillance that will take years, if not decades, to rectify. Reports indicate that Iran utilized a highly sophisticated, coordinated saturation campaign, a high-low mix of ballistic missiles, synchronized with a swarm of low-cost, loitering munitions. The objective was not merely to hit the plane, but to physically overwhelm the base's integrated air and missile defense (IAMD) system. While the Patriot missile batteries were occupied intercepting waves of cheap drones, a high-precision ballistic missile streaked through the gaps, targeting the most sensitive components of the E-3, the tail assembly, and the mission-critical radar rotodome. Analysts argue this strike carries a much heavier message than a general bombardment of runways or fuel depots. Iran is signaling its capability to identify and prosecute high-value airborne assets, HVAAs, even within their most fortified nests, continually pounding a single high-profile target like Prince Sultan forces the US into a reactive, passive defensive posture, placing immense psychological and physical strain on maintenance crews and personnel already exhausted by over a month of high-intensity conflict. A former US Air Force officer recently told the media that this loss severely compromises the American situational awareness over the Persian Gulf. When the Sky Eye is blinded, the ability to track missile launches from deep within the Iranian interior is delayed by critical seconds or even minutes. This directly threatens the safety of the more than 300 US service members already wounded in this conflict, as early warning times are drastically reduced. Furthermore, the loss of airborne command and control capabilities creates a ripple effect of anxiety among regional allies like Saudi Arabia and the UAE. If the United States cannot protect its own aerial brain, a massive question mark is placed over its ability to defend Allied oil infrastructure or nuclear power plants against a determined Iranian missile volley. Meanwhile, with the 3,500 sailors and Marines aboard the USS Tripoli now on station, predicting the White House's next move against Tehran has become significantly more complex. This force belongs to the 31st Marine Expeditionary Unit MEU, an elite rapid response force trained in a wide array of specialized operations, including amphibious assaults, heliborne raids, and visit, board, search, and seizure (VBSS) missions. These Marines possess independent air and ground combat elements, making them a Swiss Army knife for regional escalation. One of the most shocking scenarios being discussed by senior military officers in the New York Times is the possibility of President Donald Trump ordering a direct amphibious seizure of Karg Island. For Iran, this island is the economic heart of the nation, processing the vast majority of its crude oil exports. Theoretically, the US could utilize its amphibious ready groups, ARG, in conjunction with the MEU, a highly flexible force of 2,000 to 3,000 ground troops, to seize and hold strategic infrastructure on the island. The proposed doctrine involves the Marines acting as the door kickers, quickly securing and repairing the island's airfield to receive heavy transport aircraft before handing over control to the 82nd Airborne Division for a long-term occupation. However, analysts warn this is a high-risk gamble of the highest order. To even approach Karg, the US fleet must navigate the Strait of Hormuz, which is currently under a tight Iranian blockade. An amphibious force would be caught in a crossfire of anti-ship cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, and swarms of kamikaze UAVs launched from hardened coastal bunkers. Such an operation would not only require a massive logistical tail, but would also carry the risk of catastrophic political consequences within the US. If casualties exceed the public's threshold for pain, while the US weighs its landing options, to the south, the formal entry of the Houthi movement from Yemen has effectively nullified all previous de-escalation efforts. Experts suggest that while the Houthis know this intervention brings them no direct material benefit, it is the blood price they must pay to reciprocate years of sustained military and financial support from Tehran. The Houthi strategy is noted for its extreme cunning. Instead of directly attacking fortified US bases, which would invite a devastating shock and or retaliation from Washington, they have chosen to target the world's maritime jugular. With the Strait of Hormuz closed, the Bab al-Mandeb Strait has become the only remaining choke point for global energy flows. The Houthis, utilizing their high ground advantage along the Red Sea coast, are using UAVs and missiles to enforce an informal no-fly and no-sail zone, placing immense pressure on global markets. Observers fear that Saudi Arabia cannot remain neutral as infrastructure on its doorstep is threatened, potentially shattering the fragile 2022 ceasefire. After an initial phase of high-intensity, saturation attacks, Tehran appears to be shifting its tactics in a visible way. Intelligence reports indicate that Iran is reducing the volume of its strikes, moving toward a trickle strategy, distributing small, sporadic launches throughout a 24-hour period. This is a clear sign of resource conservation. The rate of missile and UAV expenditure is likely outpacing production capabilities under a total blockade. Iran needs to maintain a strategic reserve to defend its sovereign territory in the event of a direct US ground invasion. Furthermore, these sporadic strikes force enemy air defense systems to remain in a state of high alert 24/7, causing extreme personnel fatigue and draining expensive interceptor stockpiles that are far more costly than the cheap drones they are meant to destroy. By avoiding massive detectable salvos, Iranian missile units can more easily remain hidden in missile cities and underground bunkers, evading detection by remaining AWACS or US satellites. Experts emphasize that Iran has yet to deploy its most advanced solid-fuel ballistic missiles, likely keeping them as a final deterrent for a worst-case scenario. However, their long-term sustainability is being questioned as US and Israeli airstrikes continue to degrade their military-industrial base. In summary, the Middle Eastern chessboard is steadily evolving into a war of attrition, a contest of both material resources and psychological willpower. The United States holds the steel fist of amphibious ready groups and carrier air wings, but hesitates to deliver a knockout blow for fear of a permanent quagmire. Iran and its allies, like the Houthis, are technologically disadvantaged but possess significant geopolitical leverage and a much higher tolerance for loss. The current battlefield picture shows that the advantage will go to whoever can sustain their logistics the longest and whoever can better protect the global maritime choke points. The Houthi entry and Iran's shift to harassment tactics are forcing the US to face a sobering reality. Pure military might is sometimes insufficient to resolve conflicts fueled by deep-seated desperation and ideological loyalty.